My fiance wants a break after visiting my parents and going through some old photo albums. So we've been dating for a little over 6 years and recently went up to my parents last weekend, and we met in college for more detail. While there, we ended up going through some old photo books with my parents, but when we got back home, my boyfriend said that he wanted to talk. He said he was bothered by the old photos of me doing aerial silks when I was in my teens and said that it came off as inappropriate, and this was the first time he ever commented on something that I wore or used to wear. He also said he was disappointed in my parents for having no issue with it either. But when I asked why he was bothered when it was so long ago, he said that his mum, who was very religious, he's an atheist, never let his sister wear anything not down to her knees, and that he was concerned I might put our potential children in pole dancing, because silks was close to it. And I told him I disagreed. When I said that though, he said that that was the problem, and that he wanted a break, and he's been staying with his brother for the past 2 days without calling me at all. I think it's immature, and I told him before he left that I just wanted to talk like adults about whatever is behind this, but he said he wasn't interested until he talked to his brother. And I just want to ask what I should do from here. I'm reconsidering a lot myself too, but I'm hurt that he wants to confide in him before me, and was fine before the trip, but after seeing the old albums, has an issue with me. Edit. He said he was having second thoughts about me as a mum because I might put our potential daughter in pole because it's similar to silks. And when he was looking at the photo book, he kept saying how his mum would never let his sister wear anything that doesn't go down to the knees, and that I looked like a stripper at 16, which really hurt. And now in the comments, why would you want to marry someone who can't even talk to you like an adult when something is bothering them? And OP replies, I am already at the point of reconsidering right now because he literally just said that I looked like a stripper at 16 when I was just doing a hobby, and it really made me feel hurt when he said it, and it still does, even to the point of saying that he thinks that I might be a bad mum who puts their daughter in pole because it's similar, when it's not at all. Dude, imagine the psychological harm he would do to your daughters. I would definitely reconsider. If you stay, is he going to be like this every time you guys get into an argument? What you did in the past has nothing to do with how you'll raise kids. F him. He sounds like he wants a 1950s marriage. If it was me, I'd tell him to come get his crap and not come back. And OP says, literally at that point. But he's not responding to anything in terms of calls asking how he is at the least. Like, it still hurts, but he's just ignoring me to talk or pick up his stuff, probably if I were to ask him because he'd just not answer. Sounds like you dodged a bullet. That man has issues. OP says, I just hated being compared to him or his sister when it was so long ago. Why are you seeing this as a you problem? This guy is unhinged. Why would you want him near your future children? You don't need to talk to him. OP says, mostly contemplating how to get his stuff out of the home when he's ignoring me, and his brother is the one that I'm worried about because he's often in legal trouble and he's been distant from him, from what he says, until the break, and now wants advice from him, and I could see him try to pull something that makes it seem like I broke his stuff because of his brother. Have a friend stay with you and get his crap packed. That way you have a witness to not breaking his things. Take photos and videos with timestamps. Hell, even give the police a call as a heads up, and when he shows up, you can call them to ensure things go smoothly. If his brother has a history of criminal trouble, and that's the first person he goes to after claiming to cut contact, then you need to be prepared that they may both show up and make a scene. Please have a friend come over and stay with you, or your parents, anyone. He went to 0 to 100 real quick, and that's alarming. It sounds like you now have some new information about him that you need to consider during this break. Namely, 1. He is judgmental and disrespectful of the way your parents raised you, and believes he can accurately assume things about you as a result of that upbringing. 2. He believes that at least some serious issues about this relationship with you should be discussed with others before or instead of discussing them with you. 3. He believes photos of activities that you participated in as a child give him some information about who you are that a 6-year relationship with you didn't give him. And 4. He has some sort of ideals regarding modesty and how young women should be taught to behave that are at least partly based in his religious upbringing. He seems to idealize the way that his parents raised his sister, even if that results in a loss of freedom for his sister. During this break, you might want to give some thought to these things. Maybe through this incident, you both discovered some deal breakers about the other person. And OP says, "You literally laid out everything that I'm kinda thinking, but was too emotional to see. Like him calling me a stripper at 16 hurt the most, and made me still hurt a lot. And I'm reconsidering a lot right now too." 6 years is a long time, and I understand how tied to him you must feel, but take these things seriously. How he treated you is exactly how he'll treat your daughter if and when she asks to do something that he feels is close to stripping, which could be anything from dance classes to wearing a two-piece swimsuit. Put a lot of thought into marrying and raising children with this man. And OP says, "I'm pretty much considering how to tell him that I'm done, although he's just ignoring my calls when I asked him how he was, despite how it still hurt. And his parents are ignoring me too. It's just a lot how the photo book changed how he viewed me." And now onto the update. I want to clarify something that I didn't in my first post, and that is that I've practiced silks in college as well. He saw me practice there and had no issue with it, but only had an issue with my high school recital outfit, a unitard that went down to my knees. When I practice, I'm in yoga pants and a tee usually, but him comparing me to my sister was nothing new, but something he promised to stop doing years ago until the photo book made him break it. In the past, he would compare privileges that I grew up with to the ones that she wasn't allowed to have and held it against me. Once we went to a funeral at a church and said I was lucky to not have trauma stepping into me, along with non-Christian music that I listened to too. I told him to stop both times, and after the music thing, he promised and stopped for a few years until this. Since my last post, we have gone our separate ways. I told him that he needed to pick up his stuff or tell me what was happening, or I would have a storage company hold his stuff, and he finally responded and sent me a text detailing what he and his brother spoke about, not even having the nerve to tell me over the phone. He said that he lied about being an atheist because he knew that I wouldn't accept him otherwise. I never said that, I'm not religious myself, and that he was a Christian, but a better one than his mom. He also pointed to the outfits that the other performers wore in the photo book recital as inappropriate because leotards are meant for sex, and degrading things like that, even saying that gymnastics leads to bad thoughts, and that I'd probably put our kids in there like every parent. He said that the Larry Nassar stuff happened because the sport was sexual in nature, which is why purity was important, and that he was sad that I didn't see it that way, and that he was done with me because of my values. He wanted his brother to help him get his things, but I told him that I didn't want him there because of how he hated me and his criminal record. He was in no contact with him until he seemingly broke it to stay with him. So he had someone else come with him, and I had a friend there when they did too. We had been working to fully cancel everything for the wedding since, and we have even been in premarital counseling and talked about how he compared me to his sister in the past, but someone in the comments put it perfectly in my last post when they said something like, "It wasn't my fault for having a good upbringing and not feeling guilty about it because of his sister who I didn't even know existed at the time, but he seemed to internalize it the entire time. I really appreciate the advice I received as I am trying to move on, but the realization of realizing the internalization is hard, and how he lied about his promise to stop. Maybe I should have known that he never could have moved on." And now in the comments, "I remember your post. Your ex has serious issues, and it's a good job you found out before you got married. I can't believe he's calling gymnastics sexual and his reference to Larry Nassar. He's a real misogynistic, sexist human who did well to hide it for so long. Thank heavens you took that trip to your parents' house and he revealed his true colors. The sad thing is, he would never say those things at the start of a relationship because no woman with half a brain would give him the time of day, and he knows it. You dodged a bullet." OP replies, "I'm afraid of losing trust in others because of this though, and what I heard from others that I know about losing trust too. Like, I tried to tell him how I felt when he used to compare me to his sister for everything I did, and he said he understood and promised to stop and did for a few years. But then all of this happened. I'm also afraid of how long it'll take to get married or find someone else in the back of my mind and not wanting to rush into anything. I think you need to look back and seriously analyze all the red flags that you ignored or thought you could put up with that led to this situation. If you see that in the future, run. Do not settle for deal breakers anymore. OP says, I feel like having a conversation to voice my distaste to his original comparisons to his sister in my lifestyle was what we should be able to do at that time. Talk things out and see how he responds instead of internalizing how it made me feel. But I also think you were right and that I shouldn't have ignored them. If I can just ask, did I approach that wrong by voicing how it made me feel? Or did you perhaps mean that I should have considered leaving at that point instead of bringing it to his attention? No, I did think you did the right thing by voicing how you feel. But if it was something you had to voice multiple times or felt like you weren't being heard, at this point in my life, I would leave. Always communicate. But if you are not getting what you want from the communication, I think some serious reflection is in order. And OP says, gotcha. A lot of it, I believe, was settling after having to repeat myself due to fear of not being able to find anyone else, or start over, and after the whole pandemic, which turned out to be a blessing for the wedding, but having to start all over after recovering from this too, which was clouding my vision. You don't have to start over, you get to start over. Could you imagine the damage that man could do if y'all had had children and he passed along these weird fucking mindsets? You learned things. You got out before you got married. It is much less of a loss than you think it is. Our next post is titled, My wife cheated on me 2 years ago and we worked through it. Now I want to leave and I feel guilty. So just over 2 years ago, my wife cheated on me with a coworker at her work's Christmas party out of town. She told me immediately the morning after. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. This happened pretty much immediately prior to our country going into lockdown, so we were stuck together. I was in a bit of a daze at the time, and just kind of went through the motions. I was angry and miserable, but also wanted to understand why she would do it. Hence it made sense to work through it at the time, seeing as we were seemingly stuck together. To her credit though, she did everything possible to make it right. She quit her job, cut off all contact with the coworker, offered to go to therapy and counseling, and even admitted to what she did publicly. I never asked her to do this, and her mother and sister were very close to her and were appalled. She became much more loving and considerate, and even offered to let me sleep with someone else. I was actually upset with this suggestion, but she was saying it only out of desperation. Fast forward to now, 2 years later, and by all accounts, things feel like they're going back to normal again. At least for her. She is no longer moping around the house, stepping on eggshells in conversation, breaking down when anything regarding cheating happens. She started crying while we were watching a soap where a wife cheats on her husband. Unfortunately, I feel like this return to normalcy has reopened the wound. I think about that night more these days than I did during the previous 2 years. I don't know why, but I think that society returning to a bit of pre-2020 state has made me feel like I've gone back in time to that evening. I can't stand to look at her anymore. Not in a she disgusts me way, but in more of a why are you still even here kind of way. I feel guilty for wanting to leave now after all the work that she put in, even though logically I know I shouldn't. I feel like I'm the bad guy for wanting to end the marriage after the work she has put in. I know people will be able to easily say that she made her bed, etc., but I'm still really struggling with the idea of leaving her for her sake. I don't hate her for it, but I don't think I love her anymore, and I know this will destroy her. Part of me wishes I was strong enough to have left when it happened. Anyone been in a similar situation or have any advice? Thanks in advance. You can't help feel the way you feel. Her effort to make things right is completely admirable, but ultimately a relationship is two people and two sets of feelings. Staying for her sake helps no one. She will sense when you are there for the wrong reasons, and it will cause a brand new set of issues. If you don't love her, then leave. It will hurt in the beginning, but if you don't hate her, then you wouldn't want her to be deprived of love, and you deserve to be in a place where you trust and love fearlessly. Staying for the sake of never works in a good way. Be kind in the break, but don't stay for some misguided idea that you're a knight in shining armor. You will both survive and thrive. And OP says, thank you for the response. This has helped. And for what it's worth, calling it quits at this point doesn't mean that either of you have wasted the last 2 years. You have both clearly done a lot of work on yourselves, and that is great. Just because you were incompatible doesn't mean that you failed. You deserve to be happy. I have never worked through cheating. I was never strong enough to do that. I have always been the type to believe that if they cheat on you once, and you go back, they know they can get away with it. It's really not hard to stay faithful. Whenever I'm seeing someone, I just make sure that I bring them up when I'm talking to the opposite sex. That's usually enough to get them not to flirt with you. And OP says, this is how I feel too. She has gone to massive lengths to prove that she is remorseful, but now, after all this time, I just feel none of this would have mattered had she just not screwed up in the first place. It's like I'm almost angry at her that I stayed with her, which isn't her fault. I should have left immediately, and I kick myself for not doing so. This is why cheating is a deal breaker for so many people. Getting past the betrayal is almost impossible, even if you try, and the breakup would be the consequence of her actions. A lot of people find themselves in your situation. They don't immediately leave because they've been blindsided and everything is too much to process. But once they come to terms with the betrayal, they can no longer look past it. Don't see the last 2 years as wasted. If you had left that night, you may still have been suffering from the trauma of betrayal. You've had a chance to work through it, seen her remorse, and fallen out of love with her organically. It will be difficult for her. She has done all the right things since she cheated, but reconciliation is never guaranteed. It will be better for her too for you to split before true resentment sets in. And OP says, thanks, I appreciate the response. While I'm glad that I tried to make it work, I almost feel like I've led her on by staying. It's not logical, I know, but I'm glad to hear so many people validate me that I don't have to feel bad if I leave, even now, years later. And now, on to the update. Thanks to everyone who commented on my previous post. I was surprised how much people cared about my benign marriage problems, but it helped me a lot. I checked this account out today to see what the responses were since last week, and was taken aback by the number of people who wanted an update. The day after I posted, I talked to my wife and laid out my feelings. I mentioned some of the points that people on my previous post had articulated very well that resonated with me. I told her whilst I had forgiven her, I was struggling to forget what happened, and the fact that we were seemingly going back to normal had triggered something in me, and now I couldn't stop thinking about it. I said that whilst I do appreciate all the work she put in to try and save our marriage, I couldn't continue anymore. I mentioned a point that someone on my previous post said, that whilst we were in lockdown, it almost felt easier to just ignore the issue to some degree, as I would always know where she was or what she was doing. But recently, for the first time since it happened, she's going into town and visiting friends, and my mind is just running at 100 miles per hour while she's out. Who is she with? Why is she slightly late home, etc.? And I haven't had to confront these feelings before. She cried, I cried. She begged me to stay, I cried again. We spent what felt like hours just sitting together in the living room, not speaking at points. She asked the same questions multiple times. Do I still love her? Will we ever see each other again? Is there anything we can try to make this work? And I think eventually she was doing it to delay the inevitable. She is now staying at her mum's house, and I'm going to file for divorce. I know it's easy to lay all the blame at her feet when you are the one outside looking in, but I feel just as bad today as I did the day that I found out what happened. I am heartbroken again, and I know full well I'm going to question myself if I've made the right choice. You can tell me it is the right choice all you like. There is no way that I'll ever be sure that this was the right choice. There are no winners with this crap. Everyone is miserable, everything sucks, and I'm here reliving the most painful experience of my life for the benefit of a bunch of internet strangers who probably only want to read about the drama and have no reason to care about me personally. I don't mean to come across as bitter, I had lots of genuine supportive comments on my previous post, I'm just really struggling right now. I won't be using this account or responding here again after this post, thanks to everyone who commented on my previous post. TLDR, wife cheated 2 years ago, originally worked through it, but now I've decided to end the marriage. Everybody loses. And now in the comments, sorry you were going through this, buddy. I truly hope you find happiness with someone else in the future. I went through something similar. You did the right thing, as difficult as it will be. I'm glad you updated us, and I'm wishing you healing on your journey. Gosh, I wish people understood the pain that comes with cheating. Not just the pain, the loss. Because the loss keeps the pain around on both sides. Unfortunately, it's very rare that cheaters show any kind of remorse. Usually that kind of behavior comes with a usually covert sense of entitlement. The situation with this guy and his wife was probably the best case circumstance, and honestly, it still sucks terribly for both parties. I just hope his days to come, once the weight of it all is off, are better. Sounds like she did everything she could to build their relationship back, but I can't blame him for his decision. It's hard to stay in a relationship when the trust is gone. Sadly too, it's just a hard switch in some people. They just cannot feel the same way about the person. No amount of work sometimes. Exactly. No amount of work would really fix it, and it's really not worth trying to fix at that point. And honestly, I think there is maturity in OP deciding to end it when he realizes that he just doesn't trust her. He mentioned that when she goes to town or out with friends, his brain goes into overdrive, thinking about where she is and what she's doing, and since he obviously felt so bad about it, he probably could have started setting stipulations or check-ins or whatever, and she would do it. Instead, he recognized that the trust just wasn't there and decided to leave instead. I think couples can move on after infidelity, especially when they confess immediately versus getting caught, but it requires buy-in from both parties. The cheating one needs to build trust back up, but eventually the cheated-on partner has to decide if they actually trust them again, and then move forward from there. Phone and location monitoring makes sense, but to me that's short-term and not sustainable for the rest of the relationship. Eventually, you just have to decide if you can trust them to go on business trips, have nights with their friends, etc., without extensive monitoring. If you can't after years, then I don't think the relationship can survive. It's not fair to either party, and it's best just to go separate ways. Trusting my partner is very important to me. If I'm in a situation where monitoring her phone and location makes sense, even if it's only short term, then it's already over. Relationships should be a partnership. If you can't stand on equal footing and need to monitor your partner, then it's not really a partnership anymore. The dynamic is broken. Then you have to ask yourself if this relationship can still really ever provide what you need from a partner again. If not, it's best to end things. Alright, and that's where I think I'm going to end today's story. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.